Hello and welcome for those newcomers today to Elevate Your Wellbeing Contagious Care. I'm Heather McAlpine and it's just lovely to have you here. So many more new members this morning. So please let me know that you're here. Please give me a thumbs up or a love heart to just certainly helps me to know who I'm speaking to, so I don't think I'm speaking to just a camera here. So if you want to tune in, please let me know. I'm talking with live videos and it's certainly out of my comfort zone. And so your engaging really helps in this process. Thank you. Hi, Margaret. Hey, welcome. And so I know if you're watching live and even replays, sometimes it's easier to just, you think, oh, I'll just be a quiet observer, but engaging really accelerates the learning and it helps me enormously with that process of interacting with you. So welcome. This is a difficult topic today. Nobody said these contagious care sessions were going to be easy, but I do want them to be uplifting. And so, because through adversity, my key idea in even setting these videos up for you was to help us to be intentional about how we want to show up through COVID. So please, there's more coming in. Please give a wave in some way to engage. And I'm going to ask you a question in a minute when you're when we've just settled in. Hi, Kerry. Good to have you here. Welcome. So through adversity, how do we want to show up? How can we look ahead, say in 6 months' time? And just visualize, if you just close your eyes for a moment and just visualize, how do you want to show up in the way if you look back, fast forward now, and picture yourself looking back on this COVID time of history. How do you want to show up in how you relate to yourself and in how you relate with others? We do have a choice. And we can react with overwhelm, frustration, judgment of others, sadly, and distancing with others much more than the social distancing that we're required to do. Or we can acknowledge that the feelings underneath our reaction, we can acknowledge those feelings as we've looked at in previous videos, and we can choose to respond with wise choices. So what wise choices are we going to make? How can we, amidst this struggle that we're all going through, experiencing losses, adjusting to rapid changes and having to adapt really quickly, missing our loved ones, comfort and physical touch, how are we going to respond in a way that we can be proud of when we look back on this event in history? So thank you for joining today. I'm going to be giving you plenty of tips along the way. And our topic today is the 4 predictors of divorce. And this is from a researcher, scientist, Dr. John Gottman, who has done 30 years of research with 94% accuracy. So very exciting to be working on this with you. And I want to encourage you, this isn't just if you're married. These predictors we all have in whoever we're living with, or if we live alone, we have these patterns of behavior with anyone we come across. So this is relevant to everyone. It's just that the research has been done specifically with married couples. So I'm going to give an analogy first. Or first of all, I'll ask you the question, what do you think are the predictors of divorce? Just give me 1 or 2. I just want to be curious, do a survey and ask you. Just type in now in the comments section, what comes up in your mind immediately when you think of what brings on a marital breakdown or a relationship breakdown? Hi, Amanda. Hi, Sandra. Welcome. Good to have you here. So let me know. Just type it in now quickly. What do you think brings on a relationship dissolution? So the common theme that we're going through with COVID is, I've noticed, observed over this last month, this incredible uncertainty and feeling worn out by it, that now the season of settling into it is becoming accumulative. First of all, it was a real novelty, particularly for introverts, and we talked about that, the extreme difference of response that extroverts and introverts have to this situation in history. But even now, I'm hearing from introverts saying, this is tough. The longer it goes on for. And I've likened it to, hi Sally and hi Susie, welcome and great to have you here, new members. Well done. So the topic is the 4 predictors of divorce, and I'm asking you just to type in what you think are. This researcher, John Gottman, has given 4 ones over his 30 years of longitudinal studies, but I'm just curious to do a survey and see what you think they might be. So you don't have to think of 4, just think of 1, that's fine. Just put it in the comments bar. So when we've got this uncertainty and we're feeling worn out, it's like we're talking in patterns that are unhelpful sometimes. And we do that at any time, but particularly when we're under stress with this experience. And I know there's some young mums watching now, Sally and others, and I want you to just think about how, I remember the days when I used to coach our 2 daughters netball, and great, Amanda, love your responses, criticism and contempt. So we're going to look into that in a minute, but let's hear everyone else's responses first. So if you can picture little kids, first up playing soccer or playing netball, I'll give you the experience of netball first, because this is what we're doing in COVID. It's an analogy that really resonates for me. When I was coaching our daughters netball, and they were like 6 and 8, and I was asked to coach both their teams, and they'd never played netball before, no one anywhere in the teams at all. And when they'd catch the ball, they'd think, oh, they'd just throw it anywhere. And I can remember my daughter throwing it in the wrong direction half the time. It didn't matter that she didn't even realize she had to get it into that goal up there. She was just the goalpost up there. She just thought, oh, I've got the ball, I'd better quickly throw it to somebody. And even if it wasn't somebody on her team, her aim was just to throw it. And that's what we tend to be doing in COVID now. I'm hearing from people. And just this out of control responses sometimes in their families because of living in such close proximity under the one roof and all the challenges that can involve with homeschooling and working at home. So also with a soccer coach, I remember our son's soccer coach, he gave some really wise advice to those boys, and I remember it all these years ago, and it's so similar to what we need to be doing today. He said, stop the ball, because the same thing was happening to these young boys. They were just kicking it anywhere, and it didn't matter. They didn't know which direction. It was just kick. Oh, I'm near the ball, kick it. And without any skill, because of course they didn't have it at that time, and this is all about us upskilling now as well. So the soccer coach said, stop the ball, control the ball, pass the ball. So first up, we need to stop. And I've got the stop sign here with our patterns of communicating. Stop. We need to look at the red light. It's orange, but it's supposed to be red up here. Okay. So stop the ball, control it before you pass it. So in other words, before you pass in terms of choosing to respond strategically. So I'm loving your comments here. Love the Gottman Institute, phenomenal insights, yes. So, and agitation is one of yours, Margaret, that you've identified as what could be a predictor in divorce. Keep on rolling them in, please, because I want to be curious and hear your responses first. What do you think is just a number one predictor that comes to your mind first, or a number one predictor of any relationship dissolution? So it's part of the game plan to stop the ball, control the ball, and to pass the ball. 3 pointers. And we're going to look at the importance of that as we look at the predictors of relationship dissolution today. It's interesting, you know, that I've identified, when we identify the problem, and we're going to look at this today, the actual problems that bring on relationship dissolution. When we have identified the problem, we are 50% there towards then making a decision to take action and curing the problem. It's like anything. I had breast cancer 10 years ago. I had to identify that I had it. I found the lump myself and I had to identify that this could be breast cancer. And it was. And then they could do the curing treatment of radiotherapy and chemotherapy. And so it has to be identified. We can't put our head in the sand and ignore it. And it's interesting that I was thinking, I'm not asking you to do anything that I don't do here myself, because I had to identify a problem just last week. And again this morning, you might have noticed I was a minute late coming in today. And I'm going to be honest with you, and it was the same. I was a minute late the very first session. And just in expressing my vulnerability, I had fears of pressing that button to go live. And some of my friends have said, oh, you know, how can you have that fear? You speak in front of so many people. It's so different going live because I don't have the engagement as much and it feels weird. So I had to identify my fear of, what am I going to sound like? I'm not good enough. The messages, the negative messages that rolled in my head before I pressed the button. I could tangle up my words. I could go off on tangents. And so I had to change my self-talk to get to the cure. Okay? I had to identify the problem. Oh, I've got a fear of pressing the button. And then I had to quickly make a decision. Take action, Heather. Give yourself constructive mental words that are life-giving, which are, you can do this, Heather. You've spoken before to large audiences, so you can speak to a camera, even if you're not getting the engagement that gives you that encouragement to go on. And I'm getting heaps of engagement, don't get me wrong, but it's just so different to speaking to a live audience. So I had to choose a cure. I had to act on the antidote of fear. And the antidote of fear for me was change my self-talk, press the button. So we're going to look on Saturday about the antidotes to these 4 predictors of divorce today. We can't do it all in the one session. It would take far too long. Even so, it's going to be hard enough to do it in 2 sets of half hours. But I just want to give you that hope. Saturday's session is going to be, how do we get a cure to these 4 predictors I'm going to touch on now. So welcome Peter and welcome Chloe and Amanda. Your feedback for engagement. You come across as a warm, personal, articulate, genuine speaker. Thank you for sharing. Thank you so much, Amanda, for your encouragement. I needed that right now. Thank you. So the 4 predictors of divorce. Being able to identify these 4 horsemen that Dr. John Gottman talks about, he likens it to the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Okay, and you might know of the the apocalypse, the horsemen of the apocalypse, that is the analogy here in the book of Revelation in the Bible. And it's just about the sense of there's going to be war and destruction, famine, and death in the end. And he likens it to the death of marriages or long-term relationships. Hi Alison, my beautiful dear sister. If you've just tuned in, she's from the States, so she's different timing, but if you've tuned in, I'm asking you to just type in the main predictor that you think, or one or two, of what brings on divorce. So this Dr. John Gottman, I'm indebted to his work because of his longitudinal studies. And these four horsemen of the apocalypse that just is, you know, the tragedy after tragedy that occurs with what will happen in Revelation in the end times, he likens to that with troubled marriages, that the four horsemen will appear bringing tragedy after tragedy in your relationship. It will bring starvation, plague, and war. And I love his analogies. And so in stable marriages, we have a degree of goodwill, and we don't get exposed to the full destruction of these chronic ways of relating, but we can't fully avoid them. So that's why this session is so helpful for all of us, whether we're in marriage or not, because we all tend to hop on a horse every now and then. And the key is identifying which horse you tend to hop on. Because some of the horses with the destructive patterns, you might contemplate to which degree. I want you to, as I'm talking about these patterns, I want you to contemplate the degree to which they've affected your marriage over its journey. And perhaps you've survived the fully grown horsemen that come in and really do damage, but you may be dealing with a lesser pony of the apocalypse, or you might just have a small rocking horse. We've all got those degrees of hopping on to a little horse every now and then. And I'm going to give you the antidotes for each one on Saturday, and how you need to cure it. Let's look at these four horsemen now. The first one is criticism. And what I mean by criticism is it's actually of being so offensive in that you have globalized, you have generalized your whole partner and attacked them enormously. You are making an attack on their character. So it's like, you idiot, you are a psycho, you always destroy everything. You are an annihilator, whatever. And it's that type of criticism I'm talking about. It's very different to, as John Gottman says, he talks about the word complaint, making a complaint. So different to making a complaint. The difference with making a complaint, we need to actually give feedback to our partner or the people we're in close relationship with if we want to improve that relationship. And making a complaint is just saying, hey, I'm finding this difficult right now. I feel disappointed. I feel really used or rejected when you turn away from me when we're in the middle of a conversation. Can you see the difference between those two? That you're not, when you're actually giving feedback, which is so important, we're actually being specific with the one thing that we need to address at that time. And I realized just a few weeks ago, actually, that I was moving towards that characteristic of criticism with John, my husband, with a particular situation, and I needed to move back to giving him feedback and just making a complaint. I'll quickly tell you the scenario. So I'm a cyclist, and I do a lot more, sorry, I'm trying to get the, Hi guys, I won't interrupt now, but welcome to the new ones that have come on in. As a cyclist, we cycle in groups, but we can't do that with COVID. So I've been cycling a lot more with my husband lately. And he'd been over the 6 weeks or so, we've been having conversations about him putting the dirty clothes. They're really smelly. If you're a cyclist, you know what I'm talking about. You don't want to put that smelly, filthy cycling gear in the same clothes basket as your normal gear because it's putrid. So I have another dirty clothes basket for the shocking, sporty, smelly gear. But John couldn't get used to doing this. And we negotiated, we talked about it, and I just noticed that I was giving him feedback in a way that I was saying, I've said this so many times. Can't you listen? And you've agreed to this. And I was saying, that I was saying it was disappointing, but I was just not pleased with the way I was using my words. Okay, and I was saying you never listen. I know I heard it from my mouth. You never listen to what I've said and what we've agreed on, and you don't follow it through. Now, there's many times he's followed it through, but so I was generalizing, and it was moving towards that criticism. I wanted to move it back to just a complaint. So I ended up saying something like, honey, I feel really discouraged when we've talked about this, we've negotiated it, and you still put your smelly gear in with my nice dresses or whatever. And I feel unheard. And when I feel unheard, I just don't lean in to you or our relationship because it makes me feel disrespected. And it's the last thing I want to feel. I want to feel valued by you with what we've negotiated. And it just makes me feel so much more respect towards you when you can follow through with it. Can you see the difference between that and a personal attack? So that's what we want to be looking at. But I'm not going into antidotes now. I just want to identify the criticism. So it's verbally attacking the character or the personality of the person that you're having the conflict with. If you find that you're being critical of each other, I just don't want you to assume that, wow, your relationship's doomed for failure. The problem with criticism is that it comes in a pervasive way, what John Gottman talks about, and it paves the way for other more deadlier responses, the deadlier horsemen to follow. And they're the ones that we're going to look at now. Because it just becomes a cycle, eventually leading to contempt if you have a pattern of it. So thank you for your responses. Want more of your predictors of divorce before I go into them all? We've just talked about one, the criticism. And Alison said that one of the predictors is lack of commitment, and sure is. And we're looking at relationship patterns predictors today. So contempt is the second horseman, and it follows on from criticism. So when we communicate in this state, we're truly mean, we're nasty with the person, we treat others with disrespect, and it comes out with mocking, with sarcasm or cynicism, and we call them names, and we mimic or use their body language. And often in the therapy room, I'll see, and this is normally women, sadly, I'll see them roll their eye. I've been practicing doing it, but I don't use that technique, but anyway, it's all right, I do other things. But yeah, I'm not perfect, far from it. But when we do that type of scoffing thing, the target of contempt is to make the person feel worthless and feel despised. And contempt goes far beyond criticism. While criticism attacks your partner's character, contempt uses a position of moral superiority over them. And research even shows that couples that are contemptuous of each other are more likely to suffer from infectious diseases. So it's so important that we do get rid of this. And so and other parts of the body are weakened with the immune system when people use contempt. That is scientific research and medical research. So it's really important to take note of that. Contempt is fueled by long, simmering negative thoughts about the person that you're having conflict with, which comes to a head when the perpetrator attacks the accused from a position of real superiority or just relative superiority. And it's so important not to get into this mode, because this is the number one predictor of divorce. The number one communication pattern that John Gottman talks about. And can I say, he knows, because he's done these studies with couples over a 48-hour period in what he calls a love laboratory. And he wires them up to all these machines that test their heart rate, that test their pulse, everything. And agitation is what Margaret said as one of the predictors, and that is what leads to contempt and criticism. And it's so important that we actually address when we're getting to that stage, because you've gone down a slippery slope and really hard to get out of it. So the third predictor of divorce is the typical response to criticism, the first predictor, okay? And that is defensiveness. We all know that if we're being criticized, we tend to quickly want to defend ourselves. It's natural, we're all human. We've all been defensive. And this horseman is in marriages going down that slippery slope to divorce. It's omnipresent, it's everywhere. When your relationship is on the rocks. When we feel unjustly accused of things, we fish for excuses and we play the innocent victim so that our partner will back off. But unfortunately, this strategy is never successful. Our excuses just stop us from taking responsibility for the part that we do play in it. And sure, it's not all our fault, but we do play a part, and we need to acknowledge and accept that contribution that we've made to the conflict. So a non-defensive response instead can express acceptance of responsibility, an admission of fault for what we have done to contribute, and an understanding of our partner's perspective. So we're going to look more at that when we look at the antidotes on Saturday, but be aware of what things you become defensive about and feel like you're in a court of law. Because if you feel that way, there's an issue between your partner using criticism rather than just feedback, and a pattern for you to quickly knee-jerk your response. You know, when you go to the doctors and he prongs you on the knee and you've got that response that you've just got no control over. That's the response of defensiveness. And the last one is the fourth horseman, is that of stonewalling. And stonewalling occurs when the listener completely withdraws and shuts down. Okay, they just shut down on any interaction. And this is a general response to contempt, the second horseman. Okay, so the first horseman tends to bring a response, or a reaction, I should say, because the response is a chosen, thoughtful response, but it's a quick knee-jerk reaction of defensiveness. Criticism brings on defensiveness. Contempt will tend to bring on stonewalling. And it's where the partner simply stops responding to their loved one. And they can just shut down. They can just walk away and not even say, hey, let's come back and talk about this. It's just like walking out the door, slamming the door, just walking away with, I'm over this, I'm out of here. And you might not be saying that, but your response of just walking away from an argument says that, because body language is much more powerful than words, okay? 53% of our communication is our body language. 38% is our words, and only 38% is our voice tone and intonation and inflection, and only 7% is our words. So tune in to yourself on how you relate. What does your body language say? And stonewalling is primarily body language that really rips apart a marriage. In Kiama, we have all these stone walls, beautiful stone walls that are just put on top of each other. They don't even need any what's the word? Gosh, I'm not a builder. Any gluing. You know what I mean? This is what I was afraid of, you see, forgetting my words. But they just go on top of each other, and stonewalling in a marriage or in a close relationship, if you're offended and you just put your head in the sand, those stones or bricks go up to build a high wall, and it's really hard to tear it down. So if you feel like you're stonewalling in a conflict, I'm going to tell you before Saturday, the first thing to do is stop. The first thing to do for all of these predictors of divorce is stop. And stop the discussion and ask your partner to take a break. That's all I'm going to say about the cures of these predictors today, because I don't want to make this any longer, but I just want to encourage you with this, that there is hope. Because with that simple interaction I talked about with you, with the cycling gear with John, as soon as I was able to say, hey, honey, I'm disappointed. We did negotiate this. Can you please put those smelly, your gear in the real dirty clothes basket, because I'm not feeling heard and that doesn't help me. You know what his response was? He, without any signal to me about it, he took action. He made a decision because he didn't want his wife to feel unheard and disrespected about what we negotiate. And so he wrote this sign. Now, I know it's going to come out backwards because it's just a weird thing that Facebook does. But the sign says, down in our garage, we come in with our bikes through the garage, and then there's the laundry. And he wrote this sign, cycling gear in downstairs laundry basket. And he put that up immediately. And every time we come home from cycling now, he just strips off in the laundry and then it goes in where it's meant to. And it's just so lovely. This will stay up in the garage so that he knows. And he did it himself. And it's important that he did it himself. That's the power. He made a decision to take action. So what are you going to make a decision to take action on today? The important thing is, as I had to do with these Facebook lives, is identify the problem. I had some fear around it. Then I had to find a cure, the antidote. And my antidote was to change my self-talk. You can do this, Heather. You've got wisdom to offer. Don't let it just stay in your head, particularly through a time of COVID-19 when people do need support and encouragement. And so I just wanted to offer this service to the community. And so I had to feel that desire for the service of the community to be able to take courage and step up and share what I have. And that was making a decision to take action. So what are you going to do to cure this? Think about what you can do primarily in these next 2 days. It's not too long to wait, only 48 hours. For a task at home, I want you to think about, what horseman do you readily identify with? Do you most readily identify with? There might be two. So ask yourself that question. Write it down. It's really helpful to write this down. And then ask yourself, what are the triggers that make you move into that particular horseman position? Name your triggers, because as I said, when we identify them, we can do something about it. You're halfway there. And then the third thing I want you to do is to ask yourself, what do you need from yourself in this? And what do you need from your partner to help you to move out of this ugly position? Okay, so know that you're normal. We all hop on a horse at different times. The key is identifying when we're on it, to stop immediately and do something different. And I will give you those answers on Saturday. Share this with your friends. It's so important for any relationship. So share with your friends and invite your friends to this group to hear about those antidotes on Saturday, not just for their benefit, but for your benefit too, because the wonderful thing, when you learn together with friends, you actually accelerate your learning, because you can bounce off the ideas and the brainstorming wonderful solutions that you're getting from your own wisdom and from your friends' wisdom as you chat about it, perhaps going on a walk. So the wonderful thing also about inviting your friends is that you can develop an accountability partner then. Accountability is so important. I'll be touching on that in future sessions when we look at elevating our own well-being in the next few weeks ahead. We've been looking at relational well-being to start with, because that's what I saw as the essential, real challenge in people's lives right now. But we can't deal with real high skyrocketing relationship well-being when we don't set our own well-being to a high level also. So that's what we'll be looking at in future weeks after this Saturday. But tune in to Saturday for these wonderful antidotes. And somebody's asking here, I'm just going to, oh, why isn't this working? I'm getting some, yeah, okay. Love the work, feedback. You're warm, yes. Thank you so much. And welcome to Pam and Julie and Karen. Sorry, I haven't welcomed these newcomers, and Melanie and Amanda. Such amazing sharing. Thank you. Thank you, Amanda. What was the fourth horseman? Sandra, it was stonewalling. Stonewalling, okay. And Melinda, welcome Melinda as well. So, yes, I encourage you to share for all those reasons that I've said. And if you're watching replays, put in your comments also, because to hear what you have thought about, first of all, what you thought what the predictors were and what horseman you tend to hop onto, it helps normalize the situation. We're all in this together and none of us are perfect. It's not about getting it perfect. It's not even about getting it right. It's just about getting it started. So welcome to you all on Getting It Started. I'm really encouraged by being able to share these things with you and write your responses of what you're learning through this process, so I can add more things on connecting with what you're getting so much out of. So until next time, where we look at these 4 cures of these jolly horsemen, be brave, be life-giving, and let your light shine.